Hey folks, Rufus here, along with my producer and partner in crime, Caleb Bissinger.
Hey there.
Hey Caleb. Before we get into today's show, we want to tell you about something pretty cool we've cooked up.
Yeah, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you may have noticed that at the top of the page, there's now the option to sign up for the Next Big Idea Club Plus.
Plus. What's in the plus, you're wondering? This is our brand new subscription channel. For just $4.99 a month, we're giving this away, really, I think. For $4.99 a month or $49 a year, you'll get ad-free versions of all future interviews, bonus episodes.
And you'll get access to subscriber-only shows like Immortality, a User's Guide, where Stephen Johnson breaks down the science of radical life extension.
So fascinating. And it's kind of the perfect complement, come to think of it, to my interview with Eric Topol.
Yeah. Good point. Plus, there are audio e-courses, or as we call them, pod classes, with Susan Cain, Cal Newport, Adam Alter, and more to come.
Who doesn't want to take a pod class? We should stress that this show and its sister podcast, The Next Big Idea Daily, will always be available wherever you listen for free. But if you do decide to subscribe, there's one other benefit beyond all the extra content. And this one's harder to put a price on. When you subscribe, you're investing in something you believe in. You're letting us know that the work we do matters to you.
Because that's what drives us. It's not downloads. It's not the fame and glory.
Do we have the fame and glory, Caleb?
No, I think we're still working on those too. But no, in all seriousness, we are driven by knowing that there are real people out there who care about what we do.
And support it. Thank you in advance. I'm Rufus Griscom, and this is The Next Big Idea. Today, part 2 of my conversation with longevity expert Dr. Eric Topol. Last week, we published the first installment of my conversation with Eric, renowned cardiologist and researcher and author of the New York Times bestseller, Super Agers. We talked about the scientific link between exercise and health span, and Eric shared the fitness routine that's made him stronger than ever at age 71. We also dug into diet, laying out the nutritional strategies that can help you live longer, and along the way, debunking some myths that I've fallen prey to about seed oils, grains, and how much protein we really need. If you missed that episode, you should go back and listen to it now. Today, Eric and I pick up the conversation. We dive into sleep. Do you really need 8 hours? The answer to this surprised me. Are watches and rings that track your cycles really worth it? And is that evening glass of wine that I can't resist stopping you from getting the Z's you need? We also get into GLP-1 drugs. Why are they good at treating everything? And will we all be on them someday? Plus, could AI make doctor visits more human? We start, though, with microplastics. Bad news? They're in your brain, your heart, your lungs, causing inflammation, and there's early evidence that this increases your risk of heart attacks and strokes. The good news? Eric has advice on what you can do about it. Now, one area in which we have data coming in that is pretty concerning is the effect of microplastics.
Yes.
This is a topic that I really was not tuned into. We've all read some articles about this in the last couple of years. Your book really goes into it in some detail. What should people know about microplastics?
Well, they're pervasive. They're in the air. They're in the water. They're in our food, because the ocean is full of it and the fish and whatnot. So it's one thing to have microplastics in your body if they were innocuous, because we're all taking them in all the time. The problem is that they don't just sit innocent in our body. They take up residence. So in the heart arteries, a very important study I reviewed in the book, which is the first very compelling evidence of injury. In Italy, at many centers, they gathered people who were having their endarterectomy of their carotid artery, and they found 60% of several hundred people had plastics, micro nanoplastics, in the artery of atherosclerosis.
Yes.
And they found that surrounding this plastic was vicious inflammation. Okay, that's not good. But then they followed these people over the next couple of years, and there was a 4.5-fold increase in heart attacks and strokes and deaths, all right? Then another study more recently came out about dementia.
Yes.
And how we're seeing more and more plastics, they have affinity to the brain, so they get into the brain, and they also incite inflammation, and they seem to be at least correlated, associated, not necessarily cause and effect, like the artery story I reviewed, with dementia. Now, every system in our body gets hit. Our reproductive system, it's in testicles and semen and, ovaries and you name it. And so could it be linked to the fertility problem we're seeing?
Yeah.
This is a big, big issue which is not being countered. These are not degradable. We're doing nothing to take this on as a health policy measure. And I'm very concerned about micro nanoplastics, absolutely.
This data is terrifying. I think you're right that brains with dementia had microplastic concentrations that were 2 to 10 times higher, right? So it's doing everything bad to us. What are the solutions? Avoid food and drinks packaged in plastics?
You can only do so much, but things like you're avoiding plastic water bottles, avoiding heating food in a microwave that's in a plastic container.
Right.
All things that, you should be looking at everything plastic, which is all over the place, and saying, how can I substitute for that? Like wood utensils rather than plastic utensils and, those sorts of things. However, we need major policy changes to not let this unmitigated accumulation of megatons of plastic every day. This is just not acceptable. And so we have ways to get to a biodegradable world of plastics and to make this a safer planet but we're not doing it.
Let's talk about sleep. This might come, if we're talking about in order of impact, right? Maybe it's exercise first, diet second, sleep third, in terms of, direct actions we can take in our lives. Does that sound right to you?
They're all interdependent though, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
You sleep better, you'll exercise better. You exercise more, you'll sleep better. Diet. So yes, you're right, but there's no one separation. Yeah.
That's right. And of course, we absolutely have to sleep, right? I love your line. Sleep is a, quote, non-negotiable biological state required for the maintenance of human life. I'm going to tell my children this. What do people need to know about sleep? I mean, this is really important.
Well, the main issue about sleep, besides it being absolutely required, first of all, it's not 8 hours. 7 hours is the best for the population level. Individuals may vary. And if you want to know about your deep sleep, which is the most important slow wave sleep that typically occurs mostly in the beginning of the night, even though it's called deep sleep, you think, I'm going to have to be several hours in, but no, it's occurring early. That's the time when your glymphatic system, these microchannels, are getting rid of their metabolic waste from the brain. These are toxic, pro-inflammatory waste. So you want to get a good deep sleep every night to keep clearing this waste stuff out of your brain. And we've learned about that in recent years, and you can track it accurately, whether it's through rings, whether it's through fitness bands, whether it's mattress sensors, And when you do that, you can learn to promote more deep sleep. Now, the other thing is sleep regularity.
Yeah.
It turns out that the worst thing you can do is have an erratic schedule of sleep. Regularity is correlated with everything, like coffee, survival, cardiovascular, cancer, neurodegenerative. So we've learned a lot about sleep. Regularity and deep are two of the biggest new things we've learned in recent years. And we even have learned a lot about these glymphatic channels, such that if you take Ambien, which a lot of people still do, you have accumulation of the waste products in your brain.
Oh, no.
It goes backwards. I mean, who would have guessed that, right? So you don't want to take that. So, sleep is damn important.
And you write that sleep of 6 hours or less for people 50 plus is associated with a 30% increased risk of dementia.
Yeah.
Every hour decrease in sleep below 7 hours is associated with a 6% higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Every year during daylight savings time, which obviously a lot of people don't get as good sleep, they lose an hour. we see a spike of heart attacks across the country.
Right.
Right. So it's powerful stuff. And actually, this I had to double check. I was so shocked by it. Every 1% decrease in slow wave sleep, I guess in deep sleep, per year was associated with a 27% increase in the risk of all-cause dementia. I mean, so this deep sleep is so critical to our brain's functioning. And I think, as you say, our lymphatic system, our ability to remove this waste in our brain effectively is, I think it erodes as we get older. Unfortunately, it gets harder. Sleeping sometimes is harder for us as we get older.
Yeah.
So we really have to put a lot of thought and effort, I think, as we get older into this.
This is essential, that as we get older, we naturally lose our deep sleep. And you have to really work at it to get it back and keep it up there. So, yeah, I went on a deep sleep campaign after getting through all that data because it's like, whoa, this is really quite impressive.
Well, me too. I'm even though I agree with what you've said about the danger of getting too obsessed with the tech, and for some people, that can cause them to feel anxious and sleep worse. You spend more time tracking your sleep and you get worse sleep because you're anxious about it.
Right.
I'm kind of a data geek. And so I've got here my Oura Ring and I've got my mattress cooling system that also tracks. So I have two sources of data and I sort of high five myself when I get a crown. I get a,
I am a pro sensor for a period of time, like a couple weeks or a month, to learn and to try to figure out, like I did, how do I get that deep sleep up, right? Because it was pitiful. I was averaging less than 15 minutes or so a night. So I went into, how do I change things to get up to 45 minutes or more a night? That was a goal, and I've been able to do that for the most part. But it took a lot of work. Sleep regularity was a big part of it. Hydrating, earlier in the day rather than the evening.
Yes.
All sorts of things. Learning about when to exercise, when to eat, and what to eat. And I mean, each person can make it better. And particularly since I'm older, that's when it's especially important.
Yeah. Well, and the single most surprising thing in your book as it relates to sleep was this data showing that 7 hours is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And more than maybe 7 hours and change, you actually see a negative correlation.
That's right.
With longevity and health, right? And so I have not read this before, and it's counterintuitive to me, right? You'd think that like deep sleep, REM sleep, good for the brain, more is better. But do we have any guesses as to why this might be true?
Yeah, so there's nothing to suggest that too much deep sleep is detrimental or REM sleep.
Okay.
But for total sleep, you see these curves that the detrimental effects start going up after 7 hours. And you say, well, what does that mean? We don't really know. But again, to emphasize, these are big studies from populations, and it does counter the old 8 hours. I need my 8 hours of sleep. Some people do need 8 hours and should get that. But by and large, 7 is the number at the population level. And I would say whatever it takes to get a really good amount of deep and REM sleep, that should be your number. That some people might be 6.5, some people might be, 8, but at the individual level, it might be different.
The single biggest takeaway from my own study of my own sleep has been an unfortunate one, which is that alcohol has a meaningfully negative impact on my sleep quality. I can see it in the numbers. This does not fit into my scientific studies that support the life I want to live anyway file, because, Eric, I really enjoy a glass or two of red wine at the end of the day. Where do you land on alcohol?
It's really interesting because these studies, the reports are so discrepant. And there were 3 this year by the government, one by Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, and then 2 other by National Academy and HHS. They all had different findings or recommendations. The National Academy of Medicine was the most rigorous, and it looked at the potential benefit. And it came out to say, you know what, up to your schedule, perhaps, a couple of drinks a day or 7 or so per week is fine, may actually provide cardiovascular benefit. The risk they could find only was circumscribed to breast cancer. The other 2 were only looking at risk, and they were looking at cancer, and there were many types of cancer that any dose of alcohol increased the risk of things like colon cancer, esophageal cancer, and laryngeal cancer, et cetera. Now, what's the bottom line here? We don't know. If you have 3 studies report, and they have completely different recommendations. And they're looking at the same data. And it's not randomized data. There'll never be a randomized trial of this, right, at scale. So I think the bottom line is I try to go no more than 7 drinks a week.
Yeah.
I think that threshold is safe. I wouldn't advise 2 per night, but I had a patient recently, his wife, at the end of the visit, she says, can he continue his moderate drinking? And I said, well, what's moderate? And she says, well, he drinks 2 tequila shots and 6 beers each night. And I said, I thought she was joking. I thought they were playing, a joke on me. I said, really? Anyway, the problem is moderation here.
Yeah.
Everything is about that, right? Everything we've talked about. Here's another issue. If you had a risk of colon cancer, your polygenic risk score, and other, your genome sequence, I would say, But if you had low risk, it's different. But we don't do that for people. We treat everybody the same, like we're all in the same cattle herd. And we're so much smarter than that now. And that's the basis for the prevention of the future.
What I found is if I have a glass of wine earlier, it has less impact on my sleep. I'm curious about how much we know how important sleep is to our health. And so if we know also that alcohol negatively impacts sleep, I'm curious as to whether those things are correlated or not.
And it's different for everybody because, if I can have 1 or 2 glasses of wine and it doesn't have any effect, but if I go beyond that, then it's really, a problem. So, I think, and some people, any alcohol can really interrupt their sleep. So everyone has to learn on their own, kind of their own system.
Of course, alcohol segues nicely into relationships because though I'm learning to enjoy several nights a week with 0 glasses of wine, this has been a journey for me, Eric, but I'm making progress. I do find that a few nights a week with a couple glasses of wine with friends results in more laughter and dancing and positive things. Now, I can see that wiser people than myself might have equal amounts of fun with 0 glasses of wine, but I still find it is additive to my relationships with people that I love, which brings us to, we know relationships are important, right? And this is part of the Lifestyle Plus.
It really is. The data there are quite extraordinary. And you know what? If it takes having wine together to have more social engagement, that's really very reasonable, and that's one of the things, if you're going to take away things that people enjoy that make them more sociable, more likely to gather and enjoy each other's company, we're a social animal. And all the data supports that we need to have socialization with other people in order to maintain our health.
Let's talk about some of the incredible breakthroughs that are coming our way. A lot of your book addresses this. Why don't we start with GLP-1s, which you referenced earlier, Ozempic and all these other drugs targeting obesity. It seems like the news just gets better and better about what all these impacts of GLP-1s, which go beyond weight loss. What's happening here?
Yeah, so this is a class of medicines that's providing potent anti-inflammatory effects in the body and the brain, even before there's 1 pound of weight loss. So whereas we thought it was all a weight loss story, now we know much more than that. It also, interestingly, affects addiction, whether that's to alcohol, gambling, nicotine, nail biting.
Amazing.
It's bringing migraine, having the number of migraine episodes. Just yesterday, monoclonal gammopathy, which is a pre-malignant blood cancer, it completely reduced or markedly reduced cardiovascular events of heart attacks and strokes. It's doing things in lightweight people that were never anticipated. Again, all these things are related to decreased inflammation in the brain, as we know. Now, it turns out that the big question that remains after we've seen heart disease and liver disease and kidney disease, obviously diabetes where it all started, it's a miracle class of drugs. And I'm an anti-pharma person. I mean, I took
Yeah.
on Merck and almost was the end of my career.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not somebody who is an endorser of pharma. This is an exception.
This class of drugs is evolving, and might we all end up on them, or is it that promising?
I speculate in the book that might well be the case. When they're pills and they're generic and inexpensive and safe, and we already have pills for, some of these gut hormones, and we're going to have a lot more, and we have combinations and things, this could be, if it hits for Alzheimer's, and if it hits for, like we've seen, for prevention of cancer, prevention of cardiovascular disease,
Yeah.
Now, is the whole world going to be able to take these medicines? No, because there'll always be issues of access and cost and whatnot.
Yeah.
But we might be heading in that direction. The main point, it might not be the drugs we have today that are injectables and expensive. It might be, very low-cost pills that would be the way to go in high-risk people, that we define high risk. It's not in the water supply.
So as you've said, we have much more visibility than we used to have into what conditions, which among the major age-related diseases are likely to affect each of us individually. This knowledge is powerful. What kinds of lab studies, tests would you encourage listeners to consider getting?
Yeah, so this to me, this is really why I wrote the book, because of a dawn of a new era of prevention. So I think, we never prevented any of these three major age-related diseases: heart, cancer, and neurodegenerative. We don't prevent them today. We only react. Oh, well, the person has cognitive impairment. What can we do? Person has cancer. Let's do all sorts of chemo and treatments. And heart disease. Oh, after the heart attack and the bypass or the stent. Oh, no. We don't prevent these diseases. The science of aging has given us a path to do that. Now, let's just take Alzheimer's, which is the thing that most people fear, that dread the most, right? If you have a family history of Alzheimer's, if you have ApoE4 allele, which 25% of us have,
Yeah.
if you have a high polygenic risk score, which can be obtained for a very low cost, a SNP array of your genes for hundreds of variants, if just with that, we know who is at high risk, but we don't know when. It could be when you're 98. It could be when you're 60. We don't know when. We just know you're increased risk. Now, we have this person who's increased risk. We get a p-tau 217. That's available, has been for a couple of years. It's an incredible marker. It's as good as a PET scan. It's as good as cerebral spinal fluid. This is a blood test. You don't have to do a lumbar puncture. That would tell us not just yes or no, but when. It gives us a projection, and especially when you have a second one of those in the months ahead. And it's modifiable by lifestyle factors, diet, exercise, sleep, to bring it down, change the whole arc of the disease. This is amazing. This is big stuff.
Yeah.
So we have a path, and not only that, but we have brain clock, we have immune system clocks, we have a clock for every organ in the body, we've got body-wide clocks, we have health span clocks. These are proteins, high throughput proteins, AI analyzed. And so hundreds of proteins in your body tell us about your brain clock. Now, in somebody who's high risk for Alzheimer's, and let's say they're 60, their brain clock is probably out of whack with their chronologic age. They may be 60, but their brain clock is already 68. Well, guess what? We now take the p-tau 217 marker and the brain clock and these other things, and we go high gear prevention with lifestyle factors. And we retest in 6 months, and we see if the brain clock and the p-tau 217 and have we suppressed them? How much have we suppressed them?
Mm-hmm.
Should we try a GLP-1 drug? Should we use one of the drugs that are approved for Alzheimer's?
Right.
We have a path ahead that's so exciting we've never had before. And it's an outgrowth of the science of aging. And by the way, add one more thing, the retina picture. The retina photo will tell us 5 to 7 years from now whether you're going to develop Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, even though you have no symptoms at all. So you throw that into the mix, and that's very easy to obtain as well.
And so what are some of the most exciting lines of research that could generate breakthroughs. I mean, to be honest, I have been reluctant to get the genetics test to find out, oh, do I want to know if I'm going to have Alzheimer's in 10, 15, 20 years? I'm not sure I do. But you're making a very convincing case that there are a number of things that we can do through lifestyle, and there's also a lot of very exciting research that's happening. We've got like CRISPR base editing. What are some of the things that are most exciting to you?
Well, I think for the Alzheimer's story, pretty much what I outlined, be gene editing of your APO4 allele or putting in a protective allele, that one is in the early stages. It's being tackled mainly in mice and a little bit of gene therapy through the spinal fluid in people, but it's in the earliest stage. So I think we have learned enough about Alzheimer's now that we can go into prevention. And, it all depends on multimodal AI to bring all that data together to define risk and then set up, a preventive strategy for the person. But I'm confident that we're right at the cusp of doing that. Everything has to be validated. You can't just say, oh, here's my idea, here's the blueprint. But with the AI we have today, which is capable of reasoning as well as, integrating all this data, I think we're well beyond the point where this is going to be successful. And the same applies for cancer and for cardiovascular disease. The same template, it's just some slight differences in the types of tests that are needed.
You wrote an op-ed for the New York Times earlier this year about AI in medicine, and you argued that incorporating AI into healthcare could result in, I'm quoting you here, fewer bottlenecks, shorter waits, and potentially better outcomes. And it could alleviate routine burdens doctors face, so that healthcare might become more accurate, efficient, and paradoxically more human. Could you expand on that? What do you see as the promise of AI?
I think it's tremendously promising. We don't have it all cinched yet with the data that we need, but we've already seen the synthetic notes from ambient conversation is reducing workloads in health systems that have adopted the top-tier systems, 2 to 3 hours a day saved by clinicians, which ideally would bring patients and doctors' relationship to a higher level. It couldn't be much lower right now, and save a lot of data clerk work for doctors. But also, as you say, we're seeing accuracy in diagnoses. Just yesterday, there was a remarkable output from Microsoft AI, which is the latest of many, where the physician accuracy of these complex diagnoses was 20%. Whereas the AI was over 80%, and the cost, reducing the number of tests that were done for the diagnosis, was substantially reduced by AI. So AI eventually is going to become our friend. It will help patients make their own diagnosis and, get opinions, second, third, fourth opinions. You just, click away, you can get lots of good opinions. It will make for physicians a better life because they won't be data clerk slaves. They'll be liberated largely from keyboards, more time with patients. The humanity in medicine could be restored. That's the ideal scenario. Now, will we get there? Or will the administrators, the overlord of health systems who are interested in the financial only bottom line, is that going to help or hurt the chances of AI bringing medicine to a much higher level of where it should be, which is care, human bond, trust, presence, all those things that we want when we have a doctor looking after us, have our back. And we don't have that right now, largely, and I hope we're going to get there with the help of AI.
There's some of the people running some of the leading AI companies, people like Demis Hassabis, who runs the program at Google, Dario Amodei, who runs Anthropic, Claude, and Sam Altman talk about some kind of AGI or superintelligence threshold in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on who you talk to, which could result in curing all disease or the vast majority of diseases and very substantially extending the human lifespan. I mean, of course, obviously, this is very speculative, and I know that the evolution of artificial intelligence may not be your specialty, but I wonder how you think about, you're very close to the science of all the different pathways that can be used with the right knowledge. We've seen what protein folding can do and the way AI has helped us. Can you imagine pathways that could result in decades of more life for the average human?
firstly, Demis, who's a friend of mine, who, like Jeffrey Hinton and others, endorsed the book. And,
Yeah,
I felt privileged to have 5 Nobel laureates, getting behind the book. But
amazing.
yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about this. His strategy is isomorphic labs and drug discovery that is going to cure diseases. Mine, which he, I think, is very fond of, is the prevention. Prevention's a lot easier than curing and effective treatments. And we have the path to prevention. That's why he and Jeff Hinton say, oh, hey, there's another way to do this. They're complementary, but prevention is cheap relative to treatments, right? And it's quicker. Treatments take years to go through trials and whatnot, and usually have side effects that are pretty pronounced. And prevention, that's not something that you really worry about. So we have complementary strategies. Now, Demis is the one that said on 60 Minutes not long ago that maybe within 10 years we'll cure all diseases. That's a little optimistic, okay?
Yeah.
But we might prevent diseases far better than we do today. That's where we come together. And Jeff Hinton has said, the sweet spot for AI, he's more circumspect about AI, but if there's one area that's going to benefit the most, it's going to be health care. Now, are we going to live to 120? No. Are we going to have better health span? Yes.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, you celebrated a birthday last week. You turned 71. Forgive me for asking a very direct question, but how long do you expect to live?
That's a great one. I don't know, because I have a terrible family history. My mother died in early 50s of cancer, and my father died in late 60s from type 1 diabetes and every complication related to that. I've had polygenic risk score. I have a high risk of heart disease, even though it wasn't in my family. And that's something people should know, because you get a blend of these variants from your mother and father, and however they play out, it could be very different. So, that's why I've gone, try and go after heart disease risk individually for me, which is like getting LDL really low and the diet, exercise, sleep stuff we went over. So I'm hoping to stay on this course of being a super ager. And if I could get to 85 and not have cancer or cardiovascular disease or neurodegenerative, I'm an ApoE4 carrier, so I've got a risk for that. I hope. I don't know. I mean, I've already exceeded my parents and most of their SIBs. So we'll see. I don't know. But, I try to do best I can to promote health and a healthy immune system in particular. And I want to measure the immune system, and I did that in the book. I've got more coming with the Human Immunome Project. Immune clock, that's the future. If we can keep our immune system intact, then I know I'll and most people have a better chance of living longer, healthier.
Yesterday, I uploaded my last 10 years of lab results into GPT Deep Research.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked it to describe the patient and what I should do. Should I go on statins, or et cetera? And then I asked it, how long will I live? How old will I be
That's great.
when I die? It told me I'd live to 87. I then asked, well, could you look at all the research that's being done and all the pathways that are coming? And since 87 is 30 years away for me, if we consider all the breakthroughs that are in the works, please give me a revised assessment. After confirming that I was, yes, an early adopter, it said a realistic range could be from the mid-90s to 110.
Wow.
Assuming continual improvements in prevention and therapy. Now, obviously, that's a little more maybe on the side of your friend Demis Hassabis in terms of, changes that might come down the pike. But I'm hopeful that both you and I might might get an extra decade or two if all this stuff happens.
Well, remember, our life expectancy in this country is barely 80, and that's men and women, with men in their late 70s. And that's with all sorts of chronic diseases, age-related diseases. To be able to get to 85 without any age-related major disease, that's a great goal. It's attainable, right? And again, prevention here is so much more alluring than depending on some treatments that don't yet exist or might never, reversing aging drugs or cellular programming, or who knows, maybe it'll reverse aging. And then, you could go to 100 plus healthy aging, but we don't have those things. They may carry significant risk. I hope we'll have them. I hope we'll see reversing of aging types of strategy. But right now, the path to prevention is so exciting, and we should harness that. And knowing specifically what you're at risk for and zooming in on that is a much better chance you're going to adopt the lifestyle factors than if you just, here's what everybody should do. No, that doesn't work too well. It's when you are actively engaged. And, what you did is fascinating with Gen AI to find out from all your data. But I would submit to you that your data is very incomplete.
Yeah, sure.
That there's much more data. You could go deeper and you could get even better forecasting, And a lot of people say, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But they're not thinking about this because they do want to know if they can preempt that disease. That's when you want to know. And that's the difference now. Used to be, you're going to have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything about it anyway. So what, right? Now it's different. And the same for the other diseases. So this is why knowing more at low cost, not just for affluent people, but for all people and the people who need it the most, that's the future. Your checkup someday, you're only 57, you're a young puppy, right? Someday you're going to get a yearly organ clock of, all your whole body and to see why is that one organ acting up. And it's just going to be lined up with all your other data analyzed by AI and helping you to prevent an important disease that's related to aging.
Well, Eric, I'm delighted to learn that at the age of 57, I'm a young puppy.
You are.
And I think that you may be a young puppy too at 71. You look very healthy. You've never bench pressed more than you're bench pressing now. And thank you so much for your time. It's just such a fascinating conversation. And I hope our healthy health spans continue, maybe even with an occasional glass of red wine.
There's nothing wrong with that. I really enjoyed it, Rufus. You're having such a great, stimulating conversation with you.
And that's our show. One last thing. These are the tests that Eric recommends. I intend to get each of these. They help you assess your risk for age-related diseases, most of which take decades to develop. It's a great advantage to see them coming and be able to take precautions. The first is a DEXA scan. This measures bone density, muscle mass, and fat mass. The second is a lipid panel. This is your blood work, including a request to check your ApoB and, if you like, your Lp(a) markers. The third is high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. This is a biomarker for body-wide inflammation. The fourth is a polygenic risk score test, or PRS. This shows your genetic risk for common diseases. Of course, we always recommend consulting with your physician, and for more detail on all of the above, get your own copy of Super Agers. There are two ways to do this. The first is you can pick up a copy wherever you get your books. The second, the better option in my biased opinion, is to become a member of the Next Big Idea Club. We'll send you a copy along with the 7 other best books of the year as chosen by our curators: Malcolm Gladwell, Adam Grant, Susan Cain, and Daniel Pink. You'll also get invites to AMAs with top authors, access to our app and Substack, and more. Use the code PODCAST at nextbigideaclub.com to take 20% off your subscription. We hope to see you there. Today's show was produced by Caleb Bissinger and sound designed by Jason Freeman. I'm Rufus Griscom. See you next week.